Welcome to PCA One-on-One, Positive Coaching Alliance's podcast series where we talk with leading experts about how to develop better athletes, better people through sports. Now here's your host, Jim Thompson, PCA founder and CEO.
Really excited today to do our PCA One-on-One interview with Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors. Steve has been an outstanding college and professional basketball player, been a general manager of the Phoenix Suns, a top-notch commenter on professional basketball on television, and now 2 amazing years with the Golden State Warriors. Steve, and also has been a member of the Positive Coaching Alliance's National Advisory Board for many years and a big supporter. Steve, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So I want to start right out with your team values. When I first read about these, I created a little acronym to help me remember JMAC: joy, mindfulness, compassion, and competition. And first thing that strikes me is I find it interesting that competition is the last one on that list.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a significance to that, but I suppose maybe it's almost subconscious that joy would be the first one, because I think that's really critical. No matter what age you are or what level of sport you're playing, it just seems like it should be fun. And I always thought that I played better if I was enjoying it, and if the team was having a good time and enjoying the process. Those also tended to be the best teams I played on. So I think it's probably no coincidence that joy is number one on that list, but the other things are all just important factors. And competition, it almost goes without saying, right? I mean, at the NBA level, any professional level, it's so competitive. So maybe that's why it's fourth, again, subconsciously. But yeah, those are all the things that are really important to us, the values that we try to impart every day.
I want to come back to mindfulness, but the compassion piece is interesting. I noticed a really, I think, iconic moment during the playoffs when Seth Curry drove to the basket and 3 guys popped over on him. I think this might have been the Oklahoma City series, and he dropped the ball to Draymond Green. This was a moment when that easy layup would have been really helpful for the team, and Draymond could not handle the ball, and it bounced out of bounds. And as Draymond is running back, Steph Curry goes up to him and gives him a fist bump. And we saw other examples during the playoffs when a star player would make a play and another player on the team would not come through, and the star player would yell at him. And I just found, in terms of the compassion, that seemed like a really great example of compassion for your teammates.
Yeah, and I think compassion really is encompassed by a lot of different things. When I, refer to it as one of our team values, not just on the floor, in a situation like that you mentioned where, maybe somebody makes a mistake and his teammate goes over and high fives him or fist bumps him. Those are really important moments. But it's every day. It's, the coaching staff having compassion for the players, knowing how hard their jobs are, especially at the professional level where you're getting traded and you're getting booed and you're getting injured. And there's, it's a dream job. It really is. But there's a lot of adversity at the same time. And so I think it's part of the reason compassion is kind of part of our group of core values, is that it's important for the players to know that we don't think their job is easy, that we know how difficult it is. And then it's also really important, as you just mentioned, for the team to have compassion for each other. Every player is different. Michael Jordan is so much better than, the rest of the team, that he may not see the game, the way that I did, for example, as the, 8th man on the Bulls back in the day. And I can't imagine the pressure that he's under, being the superstar, asked to carry the team and all that. So compassion, I think, between team members is critical. Understanding that everybody's got different pressures on them, but acknowledging that in a daily manner really establishes, I think, a good tone for the team and kind of establishes just a good routine, a good environment to work in.
Just thinking about the business aspects of the game and how, players who were integral to your championship run a year ago and to your almost championship run this time, and now they're gone. And people know that. Does that make it hard to establish a relationship with players when they know that, in spite of how well they play, they could be, they could be traded?
Yeah, it's kind of a fact of life in the NBA and in all professional sports, getting traded, getting cut, whatever it is. It's a very strange world. You can develop these beautiful relationships with players, and the next second they're gone, and you're really never going to spend that time again in your whole life with that person. You're going to maintain a bond, and you'll see him or her, at a reunion down the road, possibly. But really, that daily interaction can just be gone at a moment's notice. And I think you understand that as you go through your journey as a professional athlete or as a coach. But I think for me as a coach, it's important to acknowledge that right away. Like, I tell our guys every year, the reason we make a lot of money is really not the reason, but the reason we earn the money that we make is not so much because we come to the gym every day and play basketball. We've been doing that for free our whole lives. We love doing that. The reason we earn it is because of the upheaval in our lives, getting traded, having to move your family, having to take your kids out of school, being ripped apart from teammates who you really love, maybe a city that you love to be in. But that's what we all sign up for. That's the deal. And it's important for professional athletes in particular to understand it's a hell of a deal. You get paid a lot, you live a great life, but it's not 100% positive. There's some adversity, there's some negatives that come with it, and we all sign up for that deal. But within the context of that sort of agreement, you make the most of each experience of every day. You make good friends. You try to have the best experience possible with your team, and then you are aware that it's not going to last that long, and you're probably going to have to move on.
Well, that's a great reentry back to mindfulness. I think some people, when they think of mindfulness, they think, it's just being focused and paying attention. What does mindfulness mean to you, and how do you see it playing out with your team?
Well, it encompasses a couple of different things. One is being focused and being aware, not only of the moment, whether it's in practice or in a game or at home, but on an off night when you're with your family, enjoying a quiet night. Just being mindful is, being aware of your circumstances. That translates for most of us to being incredibly grateful for the opportunity. It's one of the things that I really took from Greg Popovich, playing in San Antonio. He would talk about it a lot. He calls it the accident of birth. By the accident of birth, this entire team is gathered together playing basketball for a living, having a great time. We were all lucky to be born into a situation. Maybe it was great parents. Maybe it was great coaching. Maybe it was great genes. For many of the guys, it's all of the above. But the awareness, the mindfulness that just how lucky we all are. It makes coming to work every day more fun, and it makes it easier to deal with so-called adversity. Let's face it, the adversity that I talk about in general for the professional athlete is not life-threatening adversity. It's career adversity. It's getting your feelings hurt, getting booed, getting your family, uprooted, but it's still, in the context of living this wonderful life. And so it's being mindful of how lucky we are, being mindful of just the what's happening that day, making the most of that day. And then ultimately, if you have that atmosphere, I think you just have a happier team with that awareness of how good we have it.
You mentioned gratefulness right off the bat, and the two words that go together in my mind are mindfulness and gratefulness. That I think you said it really well. No matter how bad, and that seems to me be part of the mindfulness thing too. Is I'm here talking to you, which is, man, I'm really lucky. I get paid to work at Positive Coaching Alliance. I get to interview people like you. But my mind might be thinking about, oh man, that grant I didn't get, and the mind just goes all over the place. And if we can bring it back into the body and realize, wow, we're really lucky to be here in this moment. Do you feel like that your players? I know how I read that, when Phil Jackson was introducing meditation, and I read articles that were kind of cynical, like the players were kind of blowing him off on it. Do you feel like the Warriors are really, are they into meditating? Are they really picking up the mindfulness thing?
We've done a little bit of it. We have a yoga instructor who comes in once every couple of weeks. It's a voluntary thing amongst the players and coaches. Some of the guys do it. My first year with the Warriors, we had a sports psychologist who was a wonderful guy who his name's Chris Johnson. He's now working full time with the Pirates in Major League Baseball, but he would work with our guys individually and as a team, and we would do some breathing and some mindfulness training before games. But it's not something I've done a ton of. One of the things that I've learned as a coach is it's got to be really, really built into who you are and what your daily routine is. And with Phil, I think meditating was such a huge part of his life, his daily routine, that it just translated. It seemed like it really worked. And for me, it's more of a part-time thing. I meditate at times. I don't do it every day. I don't want to force it on the guys because it doesn't feel as much a part of who I am consistently. And so I try to keep things consistent just with who I am, not so much, things that I picked up from other coaches that I institute. It has to be incorporated into my own personality and to our players. And so I try to introduce things when they feel comfortable.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk and things written about the Warriors culture, and that's a big part of what Positive Coaching Alliance tries to promote with coaches and youth sports organizations. And we define culture as the way we do things here, make it really simple. One of the signature things we do at PCA is we start every staff meeting and every board meeting with something called appreciations and triumphs, where everybody has the floor open and you can say, hey, so-and-so really helped me with this, I really appreciated it, or we had this big win. Are there specific things that you do with the Warriors that set the kind of culture you want the team to have?
Yeah, it's really about the daily routine and what practice feels like, what our daily routine consists of. And what we try to do is relate everything we do to those core values. So you talk about joy. We want every day to be fun, so we actually do a lot. We have, a sense of humor is a big deal with us, with our coaching staff, with our players. We show a lot of video like most teams do where you go over strategy. We frequently splice in funny stuff, whether it's movie clips that might relate to something that happened onto the court, or maybe just some YouTube clips that we find funny, or something in current events that doesn't have anything to do with basketball we might show. Our guys are constantly rousing each other, talking trash to each other, laughing, joking. And so, we want that to be a constant every day. We want joy. The mindfulness comes in terms of how we practice. Once practice begins, we want them locked in. The competition occurs every day. We keep score, in our drills. We want, whether it's a shooting competition or a scrimmage, we want to keep a tally because we want to encourage that competitiveness and bring it out of the guys because they're all very competitive to start with. And the compassion, we've brought in a lot of people to practice to tell their story. We've had Make-A-Wish kids come in at the invitation of our players. We've had authors come in. Last year, we had Michael Lewis come in and talk to our guys about the process that he goes through when he's writing a book. So we try to show compassion not only through our own actions, but by hearing other people's stories. And so when you kind of consistently have a theme to your practices and your daily gatherings, that becomes your culture. That becomes who you are. And the guy who really got me to get my thoughts together on that front was Pete Carroll. I went up to visit Pete 2 years ago after I had taken the Warriors job, and went up to watch the Seahawks training camp. I went into Pete's office and he said, first question, how are you going to coach your team? And I said, you mean like what offense we're going to run? He goes, no, that stuff doesn't matter. He goes, I'm talking about what's your day going to be like? How are you going to coach your group? What's your atmosphere going to be like? And it was just a fantastic conversation because I had all this stuff in my head, how I wanted things to be, but I hadn't processed it. I hadn't formulated it. And he's the guy who sort of taught me, pare down what you want your core values to look like and then tailor your daily routine around those core values. And it was fascinating. And, Pete told me he's sort of, figured all that stuff out over, 20 years, 30 years of coaching and refined it and changed it, from time to time. But for him to share that with me really allowed me to get off on a great foot with the Warriors.
I was at a conference recently, and Pete was not scheduled, but he showed up and actually had an incredible conversation with Michael Murphy, who wrote a book many, many years ago called In the Zone, maybe the first sports psychology book ever. And he mentioned his friendship with you, and he said something. I want to read exactly what he said because I thought it was so powerful. We help players develop a vision of who they want to be, of their best self, and get agreement with them on that vision. Our job is then to keep that vision in front of them and prove to them that they can become the best version of themselves. Any reaction to that? I mean, some people would say that's pretty Pollyannish in the NFL or NBA, which is kind of a cutthroat sport in some ways.
Well, that's exactly what Pete talked about when I visited him. He said we're all in the development business. We're all player development coaches, whether you're the head coach or the linebackers coach, special teams coach, shooting coach in basketball, whatever. We're all just trying to get players to be better individually, so that their careers go well and so that our team plays better. And I think he sums it up perfectly. And yeah, maybe it sounds cliche or corny to somebody listening out there, but to me, it doesn't matter how old a player is or how much money he makes or if it's a grade school kid or if it's a superstar pro athlete. The human connection is so powerful. And when you truly connect with somebody and that person is trying to help you get better, then you're in. You're invested. And you, because of course everybody wants the best for themselves. I mean, we're all human beings. That's not being selfish. That's being human. It's being driven. And when somebody can help you in that path, it's really powerful.
Wow, that's beautiful. That really is lovely. We say that there are three things kids need to have a great youth sports experience, and the first one is connection. And coaches they'll complain, my kids aren't committed to the team, et cetera, and we say connection has to come before commitment. Which really wins people over sometimes, because that my players are not gonna commit 100% to our team and our way of playing unless they feel connected to me as a coach and us as a team.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. That's well said. And so then the question is, how do you build that connection? Because it's not automatic. And so as a coach, you better gain your players' trust right away. That's what starts the connection. The trust comes from, first of all, you better know your stuff. You can't go in there without a knowledge of what you're doing. You have to be able to help players with strategy and tips. You have to lay a vision for what your team is going to look like, how you're going to play. And then you better let them know that in an unassuming way, a subtle way, that you care about them and that they're more important than you are. And that may be counter to kind of the old school, Vince Lombardi, my way or the highway stuff. But there's a balance that can be struck, and the best coaches do that. Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, Lenny Wilkins. I played for all these guys, Hall of Famers, Lute Olson. They had a really unique way of gaining your trust, making you feel important, but at the same time, you knew they were in charge. You had total respect for them, and maybe even a slight amount of fear. And that's a really tough thing to accomplish, all those things at once. And so, how you go about that is really about how you carry yourself and the depth of your knowledge and your ability to connect with all your players.
Wow. Fantastic. There are a couple famous examples where you took suggestions from unlikely sources. I think your assistant, Nick, you and Leandro Barbosa made suggestions, and you took them, and they worked out. That's fantastic. How do you create an environment where everyone's voice, even if it's the assistant as a coach or the 10th player off the bench, where they feel they have a voice and can say something, and then how do you keep that going when I have a professor at Stanford named Jim March, and he said most ideas are bad ideas. Most ideas should die. You want those ideas to keep coming, but how do you keep people generating them when you don't take them all the time?
Well, first you make it clear that everybody's ideas are important. And so you listen to them and you offer your own ideas, and you also acknowledge that not all of your ideas are going to work out. As coaches, we make mistakes all the time. You can't expect every idea that you get from other coaches or players to be right. So what you do is you consider them. And so in film sessions with the Warriors, for example, I will frequently throw out two options to the guys in terms of, hey, we could guard the pick and roll this way or that way. What do you guys think? And it's genuine. It's not like it's a trick question. There's a right and wrong answer. There's like 5 or 6 ways that you can really play screen and roll, and that's about it. But, everybody sort of has to figure out as a group, what are the best ways going to be. And as a staff, we usually can pare it down to, maybe 2 different things. We know personnel. We study it. We'll talk to our guys about, hey, for sure we're going to send, Russell Westbrook this way or that way. But what about, the next step? What are we going to do here? Let's talk it out. And we'll watch some film, and oftentimes the guys will just start throwing out ideas, and we'll consider them, and then ultimately we'll make a decision. And I think that empowers the guys. They're the ones out on the floor, after all. They feel it more than we do. We see it, but they feel it. And when you make that part of your routine and it just becomes matter of fact that everyone has a voice, that's pretty powerful. And then maybe the key is when you do something and it doesn't work, it's up to the coach to take the blame, not in a, pity sort of way, but with the media, you never, ever say, well, so-and-so should have done this, or, Steph Curry really should have done this or that. You just, you say, boy, we could have done some things differently. I probably made a mistake here, but that doesn't matter at this point. We made our mistakes and we'll get better from them.
That's beautiful. We talk about something called the Mallory moment. Mallory Holtman was a softball player at Central Washington, and this was the ESPY moment of the year a few years ago, where a player on the other team, Western Oregon University, hit a home run and rounding the bases had an injury and could not finish the home run. And so Mallory went to the official and said, could we carry her around? They carried her around the bases. And we talk about the Mallory moment, that every player or coach, if they continue to compete, sooner or later they're going to have their own Mallory moment. It's not going to look like hers, but it's an opportunity to either elevate the game or not. And I was really proud of you and proud that you're involved with PCA. And I'm sure you remember this moment when Kyrie Irving traveled. It was an obvious travel. I think there were only 3 people in the whole world who didn't see it, and they were the 3 officials. And you were right by the sideline, and you were making the travel sign. And at a certain point, you realized they missed it, and you kind of smiled and you walked away. And then afterwards, you were asked about that. And it was a pretty key play in the game, actually. Afterwards, you were asked about it, and you refused to blast the officials. And I just thought, wow, that was an example of a Mallory moment where you had an opportunity to elevate the game or not, and you did.
Well, I do remember it. It was actually Russell Westbrook. It wasn't Kyrie.
You're right. You're right. It was Westbrook.
Yeah, it was Game 1 of the West Finals, and the official who was right there, I believe, was Monty McCutcheon, who's one of the best in the league, and he just didn't see it. He didn't recognize it. Whatever. Maybe he wasn't in position to call it. But they make mistakes just like we do, and sometimes you yell at them. Sometimes you get a technical foul to spur your team on. Later on in the playoffs, I took a fine during the finals when I wanted to protect Steph Curry, and so I criticized the officials directly. And all 3 of those things are part of dealing with the referees. And sometimes you're going to criticize them, sometimes you're not. In my mind, you only do it if you're trying to protect one of your players, which is what I did in the finals with Steph Curry. The Russell Westbrook incident, we didn't deserve to win that game, and I would not ever go into a media session and say that we would have won if the refs had made different calls. I don't ever think that's appropriate. And in that play in particular, he missed it, but we had so many other chances to win, and I thought it was more important to just acknowledge that we were outplayed and we didn't deserve to win. And so I think those are all circumstances that are tough, but it's important for the coach to do the right thing and set the example for his team.
What did you, I was thinking, when thinking about you and Pete Carroll, 2 of the very most positive coaches in pro sports, and how quickly Pete recovered from the loss of what seemed like a sure victory in the Super Bowl a while back. And it seems like you and your team recovered pretty quickly from the loss in the finals to the Cavaliers. What did you say to your players after that game? And how can coaches of at the youth high school level when they've worked so hard to get to the championship and it just doesn't work out. What did you say, and what can coaches learn from that?
Well, I told them immediately after the game. I mean, you can imagine our locker room was just quiet, and I just told them that I felt sorry. I was sorry that they didn't win. Sorry that after all this, the work we put in and the incredible season that we had, that it ended this way. But that there's nothing to look back on and lament or regret, because this is part of it. It's part of being a champion is laying it on the line, and you put yourself out there. You put yourself out there for failure and for loss and for criticism from fans or parents or media, whatever. But it takes a lot of guts to do so, to put yourself out there and go for it. And it's important to remember that nobody gets it done every single time. Even Phil Jackson eventually lost in the finals. It took him a while,
Yep.
but he finally lost in the finals. But it's really hard to win a championship at any level. Everybody else wants to win just as badly as you do. And Cleveland was still, upset about losing the year before. And, I give them a ton of credit. LeBron played an amazing series. Kyrie was awesome. They turned it around and got it done, and they deserved it. So you just, you acknowledge it, you move on. And I think pretty quickly you also, especially when you're a little older and you have better life perspective, you can move on and understand it's, it's not the end of the world. Life goes on.
Yeah. I met Herm Edwards quite a few years ago when he was coaching the Jets, and he got involved with us. And later that night, I was doing a workshop on Long Island for a bunch of soccer coaches, and one of the coaches came up to me afterwards. I mentioned I had met with Herm, and he said, when Herm became the coach, I got a call. I'm a vendor to the Jets, and I got a call saying Herm wants to meet with the vendors. And I'm thinking, what? And so he had all the vendors come in. He said, you're part of the team. And this guy and his kid went to a Jets barbecue, and he got to throw the football around with Vinny Testaverde. And I mentioned that to Bill Walsh. I interviewed him a couple of years before he died. And he was talking about the way the Niners, everybody in the NFL at that point wanted to be part of the Niners. They wanted to play for the Niners. They wanted to work there. And it seems like the Warriors have created that kind of a reputation that it's not just Kevin Durant, which is a really big example of this, but it just seems like you've got a style and a culture that people want to be part of. Any thoughts about how that all comes about? We've talked a lot about the culture with the team in the locker room, but as an organization, the culture is pretty amazing also.
It is. And I give Bob Myers, our general manager, and Rick Welts, our team president, a ton of credit for that, for the atmosphere that they sort of help create every day. We have, I think, about 150 employees who come to our Oakland facility every day. And we're, I think, one of the few organizations that has the business side and the basketball side all together under one roof. And so we try to do a lot of things connected with the business side. Bob does a really good job of connecting the two groups. And, we really do feel like everyone is, trying for the same thing, which is success. And whether it's success in selling tickets or advertising or, community service, just trying to create, our image or just winning games on the floor. It really does all go together. And so for all those people who are involved, I think if you ask them, people who work on the business side, I think they would tell you that they do feel like a part of the team in a lot of ways. They do feel connected, and that's not always the case in pro sports. So we try our best to make that connection and as I said, our front office, our ownership, our President Rick Welch, they really make that a priority, and our players understand the importance of that too. And that connection is pretty strong and very important.
Steve, thank you for this. I got just one and a quick question. I've heard it said that The Inner Game of Tennis is your favorite book, and I dug it up, my 1974 copy of it, in my study at home today. I also I picked up The Goldfinch recently because I read that you really like that novel somewhere. Anything you've read recently you found really interesting?
Yeah, I read another really good World War II novel called The Nightingale, which was along the lines of another book that I read last year called All the Lights You Cannot See, World War II novel. And Bob Myers is often my go-to guy, and I'll ask him for recommendations. And so he's recommended those to me, and they're really fun reads, kind of good to take you away from the pressure of, the job and the sport and all that. But going back to The Inner Game of Tennis, that was one of the areas where Pete Carroll and I really connected. The first time I sat down with him and we started talking about how to coach our team, he said, have you ever read The Inner Game of Tennis? And I said it was my Bible as a player. I used to read it once a year to try to connect my body and my mind and get myself in the right frame of mind to succeed. And so it was great to kind of bond over that book with Pete. And I highly recommend it for anybody out there, athletes, coaches, written by a guy named Tim Galway, Galwey, I believe. And fantastic book, and it's something that I really base a lot of my coaching philosophy around. Yeah.
So, Steve, you've been a supporter of Positive Coaching Alliance and our movement for a long time. I'd love to just, have you talk about why are you part of what we're doing? Why are you supporting what we're doing?
Well, I think coaching is always evolving with the times, and I think coaching is different now from when it was maybe from when I was a kid. 40 years ago, it's things have changed, society's changed a little bit, and it's always important for coaches to connect with their players because that's how they can make the biggest impact. And I think it's important for young coaches and aspiring coaches to have good advice, to have good role models. Pete Carroll, Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, these guys who are so good at connecting with their players, because it's not really about, creating professional athletes. It's just about impacting people and helping them get better in a lot of different ways. And so anything that I can share, like today with you on this podcast or in any other forum, it's all sort of connected to the coaching world and trying to help young people.
Wow, thank you so much. Steve, this has been fantastic, and we're going to get this out to thousands of people. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of PCA One-on-One. Be sure to visit positivecoach.org to download more podcasts.